Welcome to the Caregiver Relief Podcast. I'm your host, Diane Carbo, RN. If you've ever sat beside someone you love and wondered, what's happening? Is this normal? Am I doing this right? You are not alone. The final days of life can feel overwhelming, uncertain, and even frightening for caregivers who simply want to provide comfort and dignity. Today, we're joined by Gabrielle Jimenez, a hospice and palliative care nurse, end of life doula, and educator who has been present at the bedside of over 2,000 people in their final moments. Gabrielle's work has helped thousands of caregivers better understand the dying process, not just medically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. Today, she's here to guide us through what to expect in the final days of life so caregivers can feel more prepared, more confident, and less alone. This episode is sponsored by myvitalvault.net, your all-in-one life organizer for aging adults and caregivers. It's designed to help you securely store your essential legal, medical, and emergency information in one easy-to-access place. Because when a crisis hits, being prepared can make all the difference. Join our Caregiver Relief community, a warm, welcoming space where you can connect with other caregivers, ask questions, share stories, and find support from people who truly understand. Visit community.caregiverrelief.com to join now. Because caregiving is one of the hardest and most meaningful things you'll ever do, and no one should have to do it alone. And if this episode speaks to you, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. Every click helps us reach more caregivers who need encouragement, resources, and hope. Gabby, thank you so much for joining us. We're both seasoned nurses, not old nurses. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom and knowledge about this subject because it's a taboo for so many. And I'm so grateful that you're here to dispel some myths and also we'll talk about the realities of it so that people can feel more comfortable, I think.
Thank you for having me, Diane. I'm excited about this conversation and ready to see how many ways we can help maybe remove some fear, honor curiosity, and help those who are at the bedside, whatever role that might be, providing care, how we can make that a little more, for lack of a better word, maybe comfortable for them.
Yes. And I'm hoping we'll alleviate some fear and anxiety as well from because they don't know what they don't know, and things get ugly in people's heads sometimes, and that's uncomfortable as well for many. Now, you've been present for over 2,000 end-of-life experiences. What inspired you to do this work, and what keeps you going?
I definitely did not foresee this as being a career that I would have chosen or work that I would have ever done. I was working in commercial real estate and construction and safety for contractors. So this was definitely not in my vision. But I had a friend who was one of the kindest men I'd ever known, and he mattered to me. And his wife let me know that he was declining. He had been diagnosed with cancer. It happened kind of quickly, and she couldn't do it by herself. So she asked me to help, and I did. And towards the end of his life, she asked if I could stay with him while she worked because she had to bring in money. And so I did. So for several weeks until he died, I stayed with them, and I slept in the twin bed next to his twin bed, and I helped him shower and eat and just get through every day. And I watched this strong, powerful, wonderful man become so dependent on others. And I watched the hospice team come in and take care of him and the caregivers. And I think it was just one of those moments where you say to yourself, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I started caregiving at that time. And then and I was in my early 40s. And I realized that the elderly, especially, are often dismissed because of their age, as if their brain is somehow less than because they've
Yeah.
aged and they were ignored or dismissed or treated poorly,
Yeah.
especially around their decline and medical questions.
Yep.
So I decided I wanted to go into hospice so that I can help maybe improve the way people are cared for at the end of their life. And so I became a nurse in my 40s. I was the oldest one in the class, and it was not easy. That's a whole nother story. But I wanted to make a difference.
You certainly have found your calling because that hospice nurses, I say they have one of the highest rates of leaving the burnout, and they leave because it's so hard. But there you are, you're thriving. And, but you know what? I believe that it's your perspective that keeps you going. You are doing God's work and you believe that, and you're helping people in their final days, which is so desperately needed. So let's talk about the biggest question caregivers have. What actually happens in the final days of life?
Well, a lot of things, really. But when you're watching someone decline, and you're curious, is this part of age or is it more than that? Right. I think things to really focus and pay attention on, things to recognize in your person is if they're sleeping more, if they're eating less, if they're having trouble swallowing, if they're not as cognitive as they used to be, if they're maybe becoming more irritable or less communicative, maybe they either are too, for, not the right word necessarily, but clingy, or the opposite of that. Maybe they pull away. These are all signs that someone is probably aging or declining. It's hard to determine is at the end of life. I think it starts there and you watch. And then as it gets to be more consistent, or maybe these things are increased, that tells me. Often it's at this time when someone will go to the doctor and say, hey, things aren't right. This is happening. And the doctor will do some tests and it'll be determined that perhaps they're at the end of their life and their body is starting to shut down in so many ways. And that is usually when they might start hospice if they've been given 6 months or less to live. And it's at that time what we look for, people that do this work, is that those same things only increased. They are going to more than likely sleep more. Their bodies are tired. They are working so hard to just get through each day. Food stops being as enjoyable as it was. Sometimes it's harder to swallow. That might elicit fear. And they're just not finding joy in the things that they used to. Maybe they're losing weight. These are significant body changes that let us know that the body is starting to let go.
And it could be a process over a year or two for some people. And caregivers don't understand that. Now, I did hospice nursing as well decades ago. My father was on hospice, and now this was, you'll get a kick out of this because it was in the 80s when they just started hospice. And my dad had a Whipple procedure, and that's when they told him he had pancreatic cancer. And my dad wanted to every other year, he would go to Hawaii for 6 weeks. He was a letter carrier, and he had a timeshare. And I tell this story because the doctor says, "Lee, we're gonna put you on hospice. You have 6 months less to live." And my dad was like his first words out of his mouth, "I'm gonna have to cancel my Hawaii trip." And I was in my 40s then, and I looked at my dad and said, "Dad, if you're not dead yet and you're still able to go, you can go. We can do that. We can set up hospice over there." You probably couldn't do that now, I don't know, because they're so funny about hospice, but he was able to get over to Hawaii, and for 6 weeks, he was there a day or 2 before, and they took him off hospice because he was doing so well. But, isn't that a typical thing where people rally when they're happy and it does happen. My dad was for 6 weeks, which I'm sure unusual, but he came home, he wasn't feeling well, we put him back on hospice as soon as he got home, and he lived another month. But, people see hospice as the end, but I see it as a way for people to control everything about their life up until the end. You can choose to die at home, you can choose to die in a clinic, in a hospice home if they have them. Some places have hospice units. And the other thing is, nowadays, people have life celebrations. Have friends over and celebrate your life before you go. And so death doesn't have to be dark and dreary and sad. It could be, "Hey, I've lived a good life and I'm moving on to the next world, but let's celebrate before we do it."
First, I want to say, just going back to what you said about encouraging your dad to go to Hawaii, I love that. When you are on hospice and maybe you're going to go see a family member or travel, I don't know if it's okay as far as Hawaii, but you can connect with a hospice there and hand over the information so that they can keep an eye on them while you're there and then come back and be with your current hospice team.
Yeah.
So it is something that can be arranged. Each place does things differently.
Yeah.
But yes, and what you say, people, they say 6 months or less to live, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of a criteria for hospice. But the truth is, that's just a random number, a date,
Yeah.
a time that people, on average, once you've been given a diagnosis, it's about 6 months or less. People can live years longer, and some can live only a few days. That is unpredictable. But you're right. I think when people start hospice and their symptoms are managed, we can't change the outcome, right? The end is going to happen to all of us,
Yeah.
diagnosis or not.
Yes.
But what we can do is help improve the quality of life at
Yes.
the end of life, which will often give people more time. You and I were talking before we started this conversation, which is people think, and I've heard this often, my dad was on hospice and he died. No, he died because he had a terminal illness. His body was navigating diagnosis and the
Yes.
disease process that ended his life.
Yeah.
When he started hospice, he was given a team that could collaboratively come together to honor all the different ways that he was affected for him and the
Yep.
people who love him.
Yeah.
So could you have more time? Yes. Are
Yeah.
you going to die? Yes. We're all going to die. And when you are given this diagnosis, it might happen sooner, but hospice can give you more time. And sometimes you're discharged from hospice, like your dad was,
Yes.
because there weren't symptoms to be managed
Yeah.
and he was pretty much at his baseline and
Yep.
doing relatively well.
Yep.
But I will say that some families actually struggle with that because when you are on hospice, you've got the hospital bed and the different pieces of equipment and the supplies and the reduction in cost of medications, and you've got a team. When you're discharged from hospice, well, that means you've been given more time. It also means that now your loved ones are on their own, and that's hard. So it's hard for people. It's this weighing one of each. Do I want more time with them or how do I work this out and still feel supported?
Yeah.
So it's a kind of an bumpy path, but
Yes.
at the end of the day, I would say that, well, hospice can't cure you
Yeah.
and they can't fix you. They can often give you a better quality of life at the end of life, often
Yes.
extending your time.
One of the things I know that I had experienced with people in the past is I have people tell me hospice is killing my father or my mother, and I'm like, that's not how it works. But you know what the issue is? You stop medications. You stop, if they had a tube feed or they stop those. And people don't understand that's not cruel. It's comfort measures that the body has a process what it goes through when your death and dying process starts. Can we discuss a little bit about that? Because people just feel like, oh my God, my dad's blood pressure medicine or the cancer medication they were taking, now the cancer is going to come back. I know it's emotional and irrational thoughts, but they do occur.
People say this all the time. My mom started hospice. They took her off all of her medications and she died. What
Yeah.
people need to understand is one of the benefits about hospice is that they do cover many of your medications. They are related to your hospice diagnosis and symptoms from that diagnosis. So they won't cover all of them, but they
Yeah.
will cover a good amount of them. And hospice has a formulary that lists all the medications they cover. So you come onto hospice and you've got 72 of these medications that you've been taking for 25 years. And the first thing that happens when you are admitted to hospice is the doctor goes over the medications, reviews all of them. And he looks at these and says, she's been on this, but this really, there's no reason to take this anymore. Why is she spending the money? Why is she doing it? She doesn't need this anymore, right? Also, maybe it's not covered under the formulary. And in hospice, you get some medications covered. So why not save some money? But they're going to go down your list of medications, see which ones pertain to your diagnosis, which ones seem beneficial, and which ones are covered under that formulary. And then they'll say, you don't need to take all these anymore. It's not because they think she's dying anyway, so she no longer needs her blood pressure medicine. That's not the way it works. So what I really want people to know is that the hospice doctor will review the meds. They may suggest that you discontinue some of them. There is a very good reason for that, and you can ask the why. Don't be afraid
Yeah.
to say that. And if there is one medication that your mom or dad or whomever is deeply attached to and has been taken forever and still wants to, you can probably still take it. The doctor's not going to argue with you, but what they will say is it won't be covered under hospice. That can be your choice. But the
Yeah.
truth is, are any of these really benefiting you right now? Whether you were dying or not, the
Mhm.
question is, are these doing anything for you? You've taken them for 25 years, you've just been taking them, but are they really helping? Are they benefiting you? And so when the doctor reviews them, he's doing you a favor, both
Yeah.
physically and financially. But if there is a medication you're attached to, ask them if you can stay on it. But always ask the why. Why are you stopping these? And what will happen if she stops this? Will her body have a noticeable change? I think that's the problem with people. I think they think hospice is the boss of them, and it's not. You can ask questions. You can be curious. You can say no. Like that gets to be your choice. Hospice is coming from a perspective of complete understanding of your diagnosis and the symptoms that you may or may not have or will not have. And they can foresee, okay, this might happen, so let's plan for this. But really, the purpose of them meeting with you every week is to see and navigate and witness and assess the decline in the order that it's going and the speed that it's going. And when they do that, they can determine whether medications are beneficial or not, or if they need to be changed or increased. The other thing I want people to know is that if a medication is not on the formulary, there might be another brand of that same type of medication, just with a different name. So you can always ask, okay, if that's not covered, is there one that would be?
The other thing the families have to understand is as they go through their decline, their inability to swallow is going to impact the meds they get. And people don't understand that they can't always take their meds because their body is shutting down. The other
Absolutely.
the other big thing, Gabby, is people absolutely freak out and think they're starving or dehydrated their family member when the feeding tube is removed. Could we talk about that a little bit?
So generally, when you start hospice, you would not have a feeding tube. You would not have life-saving measures. You would have stopped any type of treatment, chemo, radiation, dialysis. So when you start hospice, it's because all measures to all curative measures and life-saving measures are stopped. So we usually would not continue someone who is on a feeding tube. We would not continue that. I think that's situation specific. It may be a discussion you can have with your hospice doctor. But here's something that people don't understand. When someone is dying, the body does not require food, nutrition, or hydration in the way that a healthy, strong body does. So when we're strong and healthy, we need that. That's the gas for our car. We need that. We need that maintenance, that care, that support. But as our bodies are starting to shut down and dying, water and food actually becomes almost a hindrance to the body. It's uncomfortable. In fact, a body would die with more peace
Yeah.
without food and water initiated. Now, at the end of life, if they are dying, are they going to die from starvation or dehydration? No. And that's important for people to know. You are not starving your person because they're not eating anymore. The human body is miraculous. It knows what to do. It knows how to live and it knows how to die. And it needs to have permission to do it in the way that it needs to. And when we get in there and we pull people out of bed because they should get up, maybe if they get up, they'll have more energy. Maybe if we force them to eat this, they'll have more energy. Maybe they'll live a little longer. It doesn't work that way. In fact, what you're really doing is making them more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful. If that person is choosing to sleep, let them sleep. And if they're choosing not to eat and don't want anything to drink, respect that. You
Yeah.
brought up, trouble swallowing. What people don't understand is that as we age, just aging in general, our throats close, right? That's why some people need chopped up food or pureed, right?
Yeah.
So as we're dying, it tightens, it closes even a little more, making it harder for things to go up and things to go down. That also causes fear. So
Yeah.
when someone is experiencing that, they know this is happening. They feel it. They might be refusing because that's scary to them, because their body is shutting down and it's not working in the way that it used to. And our role, whether we're personal or professional caregivers, is to honor that. Now, if they're starving but they can't eat, maybe there's other things that we could talk about. Maybe a feeding tube would be initiated. Could they do that while in hospice? No.
Yeah.
So if they come onto hospice with a feeding tube, chances are we would say, we'll no longer do that
Yeah.
because it's just not part of the hospice protocol. But we also don't want someone to be uncomfortable. So if they're uncomfortable because they're hungry, maybe they've got months to live, that is something to discuss with your team.
Yeah. I know it's so different, but with everybody, you have to look at the individual. But I know families have a hard time thinking about hospice isn't killing their loved one. Like you say, it's helping them to pass with dignity and comfort. But the families are frightened. They become frightened by changes like in the breathing patterns or decreased responsiveness. How do you talk to your family members and work with them on what they're going to be facing as their person starts actively dying?
Great question. First of all, I'm super honest.
Yeah,
I don't baby talk. I don't skirt around the obvious. I
yeah,
ask permission to be frank, and usually I'm given that permission. I prefer to tell the family members, those at the bedside, what could and might happen, whether it does or not,
yeah,
because my thought is that when it does, they'll think, oh, Gabby told us this might happen. And
yeah,
there's less fear, there is less uncertainty. And so I will talk to them about food and water, about sleeping, about communication. I will talk about things like the death rattle that people are so afraid of. I will explain that in more detail. I will tell them about the way the body moves, the way the eyes might look, the blank stare, the skin color changes. I will say these are things that, like apnea, changes in breathing. If I tell them all of these things
yeah,
and none of it happens, that's great. But if
yeah,
I tell them and it does, there is less fear,
yeah,
because I don't like the word normal necessarily. I do want to normalize what happens during the dying process so other people won't see it as a shock or as something to be frightened of. The body knows how to die. And while there's a lot of similarities, the bodies don't die in the same way. So we
yeah.
can't tell a person this will or will not happen. But what we can do is say, this might happen. This is what it would look like. And this is how you can care for your person. And maybe that would honor the peace part of the dying process. I've heard people call it a good or beautiful death. I don't know if those words are really make sense to people. I
Right.
would say more peaceful. And for me, that would mean reducing symptoms that cause struggle. If we
Yeah.
can reduce that and give them more peace, That is ideal for me, but not just peace for the person dying, peace for the people at the bedside.
That's important because I know I have a family caregiver that experienced with her loved one. Her husband had terminal agitation, and she was a nurse, and she felt like hospice it caused her anxiety, but she was already a person who had a lot of anxiety, and she struggled with the feeling that nobody was doing enough. So can you address a little bit about the terminal agitation and what people might see and experience with that?
I say this a lot and I've said it already, but the body knows what to do.
Yeah,
And we wish for people to just take one last deep breath and just die with this
yeah.
peaceful, right? It doesn't always work that way. A lot of
No.
times the breathing changes can be a little frightening because it's
Yeah,
so fast or so loud. Sometimes the body is moving around and the arms go up and the legs are going out, or maybe they'll moan out, or they can't stay in their bed, or they'll sit up and
yeah.
lie down and sit up and lie down. And all of that is really hard to witness.
Yes, it is.
And while I'm not a big pusher of medications, I like to try to do more tactile and verbal
Yes.
things
Yeah,
that can help calm someone. I
yeah,
do see the value in medications.
yeah,
And when you start hospice, for instance, you're given a kit of medications that should generally reduce symptoms that happen at the end of life. You've got pain, you've got agitation, and you've got delirium. One of the medications that we use commonly is haloperidol, which is also called Haldol.
yeah,
Even in the smallest of doses, it can help reduce the body's fight energy
yeah.
and reduce it so it just relaxes into what it's doing. And sometimes we'll pair medications together, like morphine and Ativan, also called lorazepam. We might do that because together those medications can simultaneously bring down some of the anxiousness. So, is that a common thing that happens at death? Absolutely. Does everyone do it? No,
No.
but it is frightening, and no one wants to see their person going through that. So what I want people to understand is that when the symptoms are not being managed by the smaller doses that hospice will start with initially, increased medications are usually the case. But it's important to know, and I try to tell families this, these medications are not going to end their life. Their diagnosis and the disease
Yeah,
process are.
yeah,
Could they die after having these medications? Yes, because their body's already trying to let go, but it's fighting so hard that when these medications are given, it allows the body to slow down, stop fighting, and succumb to what they were already trying to do anyway, which is die.
yeah,
So the delirium, that moving around, the restlessness, the anxiety, the agitation, all of that is the body's fight mode. And I know that's not the techno doctor terminology, but I
yeah,
think it makes sense in that
yeah,
it's hard to die. It's
yeah,
not always close your eyes and go to sleep peacefully. So that might happen.
yeah,
And it's in that moment where I want to help those at the bedside make peace with increased medications,
yeah,
because my goal is always to reduce symptoms so they can die with more peace, which
yeah,
goes back to what we were just saying. So in those situations, positioning is probably not going to help. Moving them, talking to them might not help.
yeah,
It's almost as though the body now at that point speaks a language no one else can speak. And
yeah,
so it's really hard to meet it where it's at. So do medications help that? Yes. Do they maybe make a person more sedated? Yes. Could that mean that they're at the end of their life? Yes. Could they die? Yes. But they were already dying.
yes, yes, yes. I know families really struggle with terminal agitation, and they always ask, "Am I doing enough? Should I do more?" What do you say to people that carry that guilt with them?
I just wrote a blog about this because I think that people carry a lot of guilt. I should
Yeah,
have done more. I should have said more. I should have known that. How would you ever know that? I
yeah,
would not know what I know if I didn't do what I do. And
exactly.
I was there when my mother died, I was there when my father died. and I sat up against a wall and I watched them. I wasn't at the bedside. I didn't hold any hands. I didn't say last words. I didn't even say goodbye because I didn't know. I didn't know what the nurses and doctors were doing or if it was helping. I never, in that, even at that young, I didn't think they're killing my mom or dad. I was very realistic. I knew they were dying. But what that reminds me is that you're not supposed to know that. And you're
Yeah.
doing the very best you can with what you have. And that's okay. And
Mhm.
you're human. You're not failing. You're not letting someone down. You are doing the very best you can with what you have. And I want people to know that. I want them to know that you are not supposed to know all of this. And that is another reason why hospice is such a great add to the care, because you do have all of these resources and you have people like me and like you who can sit at the bedside and say, what you're seeing right now, that's part of this process. It's all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I think caregivers, especially personal or professional, need to give themselves some grace and
Yes.
know that you're doing everything you possibly can. And there isn't a rule book. I mean, there's 150,000 books out there right now about how to sit with someone who's dying, and you can read all of them and still not know. And
Ex-
I'm a great example of that. You mentioned that I've witnessed over 2,000 last breaths. I have a lot of experience. But when
Yeah.
my brother was dying, I sat at his bedside for 18 days, and there were times when I didn't know what to do. I didn't
Yeah.
know what to say. I'd
Yeah.
given this advice to so many people,
Yeah.
and yet even I found myself completely lost. And I
Yeah.
think what it came down for to me was that I couldn't save him. And
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, we can't save them, we can't fix them.
Yeah.
But I think there's this part of us when we're sitting with someone who's dying that we want to save them somehow. And it makes you feel so incredibly helpless that
Yeah.
you beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that's not our role. The
Yeah.
fact that we showed up, the fact that we're sitting there, let that be enough.
Yes. I was very blessed. My dad came back home and we put him on hospice, and he started his to actively dying about 48 hours before he passed. So we had the hospice bed or the hospital bed brought in, and my stepmother and my brothers and sisters were there. Well, my one brother was in Florida, and he's my younger brother, and him and my dad had a special relationship. So when my dad started his act of dying, we called Paul because we lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but Paul was on a vacation in Florida with his kids. So they were young. So Paul said, as soon as my dad started actively dying, I called Paul and said, I think you need to come home. Now, 18 or 20 hours, because he drove. So he gets home and, everybody, my dad just was hanging on and hanging on. And as after Paul came in and Paul says, Dad, I'm here. And I told him, hey, talk to Dad. He still hears you. And within an hour after Paul showed up, my dad died. It's like he was waiting for him. And my brother holds on to that. My dad waited for me to say goodbye. And I thought that was so touching. But we all believed that. I'm the oldest of four. I'm the bossy know it all sister.
I believe that there's this amazing sense of awareness that happens to people who are dying. And they
Yeah.
know you're there, they know when you're not there, they
Yeah.
know what you're saying, how you're feeling, what you bring into the room. And I have heard so many times where someone, was waiting for their family member or their partner or someone to hurry up and get there, right?
Yeah.
That they were going to hold on until that moment. Who are we to deny that, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
But with that, I also believe that they know when someone leaves the room
Yes.
and choose to have that moment to be when they take their last breath.
100%. Yes.
Some people want an audience. Some people want their favorite person. Some
Yeah.
people want to say goodbye to every single person until they've got to everybody before they say goodbye. And some
Yeah.
don't want an audience.
Yes.
Some want some privacy, and they don't want that to be the last thing you see.
Yeah.
So when you just walk out or before you walk back in and they take their last breath, it's not personal. It's
No.
permission. You've given
Yes.
them permission to do it
Yeah.
when they were ready.
Yeah.
People all the time, if this happens,
Mm.
they don't take with them who was there at their last breath. They take with them who was there all along,
Yeah.
whether it was from a distance, whether it was over the
Yeah.
phone or text or whatever, or at the bedside for every single day. And you
Yeah.
miss that one moment. That's not abandonment. You didn't
Yeah.
leave them. You didn't let them down.
Exactly.
You gave
Exactly.
them permission.
I had a situation, I was working at a cancer center, and this lovely young woman was actively dying, and her family had been there 10 days round the clock, just sitting by her. Nobody left, nobody they were brushing their teeth and washing their faces in the sink in the patient's room because they wanted to be there, and they all got to a point where they said, "We're going home to shower, take a nap, and we'll come back." And it was within an hour after they had left, she passed. And I agree, there are just times when she didn't want the drama, she didn't want whatever, she just wanted to be peaceful, and that's how she passed. And it was a lovely thing for her, because one of us nurses was there with her, but it wasn't her family.
I think that there's so much we don't know. We speculate, we guess, we
Yes.
romanticize death and dying. And you can see 2000 Last Breaths and have a lot to pull from. But the truth is, it's magical and miraculous and wondrous and all the things that cause us to go, like we can't predict the way someone is going to die. And
No.
so if we could just take a moment and step back and just know that our presence is often enough, that
Yes.
this will play out in whatever way it needs to,
Yeah.
and that there is someone, especially if you have a hospice team there, that will show up for you and help you navigate that.
Yeah.
You're not doing this alone. As caregivers, I think that's so important that they know that they're not only are they not doing it, they don't have to. There
Yeah.
are people, there are resources, and that's kind of I've made it my life's work is to help the caregiver
Wow.
to have the tools to feel confident enough at the bedside that they are not afraid. And that's really our role. And I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to have all the answers, and they don't have to have all the answers.
Right. What is the most meaningful thing a caregiver can do during those final moments?
Respect the person in the bed. Remember that's their space. That's
Mm.
that when you come into their room, don't turn on the light right away. Let them know you're turning on the light. Don't just take their covers off or raise or lower the bed. Tell them that you're doing that. If you're going to
Mm.
give them medications, tell them you're putting something in their mouth. Talk to them. They have feelings. They are still alive, and that is a
Yeah.
human being in that bed, and they deserve respect and dignity, compassion and kindness, and slow down. Why are you in a hurry? Yes, I know if you work in a facility, you have 30 other people that you have to do this same thing to. But in that moment, when you are in their room, in their space, remember that is a human being. They are
Yeah.
alive and they know everything that's happening to them, even if they can't talk to you. And if you just take a moment to say, it's okay, Mr. Jones, it's me. I'm right here. I'm just going to change your brief or I'm going to reposition you so you're a little more comfortable. I just want you to know I've got you. And let that be enough. I think that we have to treat people with more respect and humanize
Yeah.
and this whole experience and come from a heart centered way of being. I think hospice has gotten so busy with protocols and how many patients you can see and how charting is going that they're
Yeah.
forgetting in many ways that's a human being who is about to have the end of their life. And there is someone at that bedside who's preparing to say goodbye. And that is real and heavy
Yeah.
and beautiful and sacred. We have to slow down and just be in
Yes.
that moment and show respect.
My dad was I was raised Catholic, and he used to say a special prayer to Saint Joseph every day. And as he was chain stoking where there were long periods of no breathing. Then all of a sudden he would breathe again. So I had my hand on his chest and I could feel his heart beating very rapidly. So I started praying, reading his prayer to him, whispering it in his ear. And that's why I could feel his last heartbeat. And that's how I chose to honor him when he passed, by doing that. And I think family members don't realize that hearing is the last thing to go. Tell them good news, share, whatever. Or some people that you just have to say, hey, it's okay to go, because don't hang on. But people don't understand when they still hang on that you can't control just because you're saying it's okay to let go, that they're going to let go. They may have some unfinished business somehow, some way that they want to get done. So I think that,
I think people, they're sitting at the bedside and their person is no longer talking and they know that they're dying. They're realistic. They understand all of this. But there's this hesitation, almost an emptiness. And as they're sitting there, they're afraid to do or say the wrong thing.
yeah,
And much like you, I tell them you love them. Tell them
yes,
you're
yeah,
sorry if you need to.
yeah,
Offer forgiveness, accept unsaid forgiveness.
yeah,
Tell them that you're going to say their name all the time, that you're going to tell their story, that there's no D at the end of love because you
yeah,
love them and you always will.
yeah,
Say goodbye. Say the things that you need to say, because if you don't, when that last breath is taken and you move on and try to get through your life without them, there is going to be this underlining of regret. I should have said I was sorry. I
yeah,
should have said goodbye. I should have said I love you one more time. You
yes,
don't have to do that. But
yeah,
if you think that you're going to regret not doing it,
yeah,
then do it. And do they hear you?
absolutely.
I believe they hear you.
I do
So,
too.
right? And that's comforting. Imagine they get to take that with them. What a gift that
Yes,
is.
yes, yes. If you could leave caregivers with one message about being present during the end of life, what would it be? I think you just addressed it right there.
I would say, all of what we've talked about for sure.
Yeah,
But when that last breath has been taken and you're sitting at a bedside and you're realizing the reality of what has just taken place, don't rush that. That is sacred time. And this person will never do that again. And you will never witness that again with them. And so that was a moment that you were gifted, regardless of how
yeah,
hard it is.
yeah,
That is for sure. But you were the one chosen to be there at that moment. And that's an honor and it's sacred. And just let it be. There's no rush.
yeah,
Just let it be. Sit with it for a moment. I still believe that even after last breath, there's some sort of energy that they're picking up. So I might continue something like, for me, for my patients, my clients,
yeah,
I will say, thank you for trusting me with your care. Thank you
yeah,
for letting me be here. I wish you a peaceful journey.
yeah,
I thank you and goodbye.
yeah,
I want to make sure I say goodbye. That's important to
yeah.
me.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Gabby, for sharing your experience and your wisdom and knowledge. I think you answered a lot of questions that people want to know about but are afraid to ask. So I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me. You asked some really great questions. And I think that at the end of the day, we need to make sure that caregivers have the tools to be able to feel confident at that bedside, but also the resources for people that can help them, because that's a really tough place to be in.
It absolutely is. Absolutely. I've been there professionally and personally, and it's never easy, no matter which, whether you're a professional but I feel like it is a beautiful gift. I see it too as a gift and humbling to be at somebody's bedside as they pass. I really
Absolutely.
do. Yeah.
I agree.
To my family caregivers out there, you are the most important part of the caregiving journey. Without you, it all falls apart. So please learn to be gentle with yourself. Practice self care every day because you are worth it.